So when you're watching this, I will be in Japan, meaning I will be a day ahead of the United States in the future. And in the future, the Green Bay Packers are Super Bowl champions. Grossi Posse Packer Nation, welcome. Hold on, let me travel back in time and do that again. Grossi Posse Packer Nation, welcome to an episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't do Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Power rankings have returned until, the draft, and they'll be back one more time, and then that'll probably be it until, the actual season starts. But hey, at least we got him back, Grossi. And today, we are going to be ranking the top 10 teams post-free agency. Now, at the time of recording this video, there are some things that still are left undone, in which Aaron Rodgers, is he going to be signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers? And even if he goes with the Steelers, I don't know if they're going to be a top 10 team, so that's why I'm going to record this right now. But we also got to see where Trey Hendrickson is going to go. Maybe he's going to return to the Cincinnati Bengals. Maybe he's eventually going to get traded. Jair Alexander hasn't been moved at this point. And so there are still some missing pieces, but I feel as confident as I can to rank the top 10 teams because I don't think there's going to be much movement even with acquisitions of those guys. Even though Hendrickson could make a big difference for a team like the Packers, or Jair Alexander, maybe with the Ravens, could boost them up a little bit. I still feel pretty good to get into the top 10 right now. And before we jump into those top 10 teams, I do want to do some honorable mentions. And the first honorable mention is going to be for the Cincinnati Bengals. And I gotta shout them out because they at least deserve some credit for taking a shot here. And I think there's a lot of people who are talking about what the Bengals did, signing T. Higgins and, of course, Jamar Chase to mega contracts. Jamar Chase getting the highest paid contract for a non-QB in NFL history, as, hey, they're the same team or where they were last season, right? Which is fair. They were not a playoff team last year. However, they won their final 5 games, and they are a very different team in December from where they were in September. And I think that if the Bengals are able to get some improvement from their offensive line, looking at you, Mims, and on top of that, adding some pieces to that defense, whether it's bringing back Trey Hendrickson or, of course, drafting well, I think the Bengals are going to be a very competitive team this season. It's just going to be in that 4-year window. Are they going to be able to contend for a Super Bowl? That's the most important thing. But this move for the Bengals is pretty unorthodox for Cincinnati, who usually does not spend a ton in free agency. But hey, they put their money where their mouth is, and ultimately we'll see if this is the right move. And so because of that, I got to give them some credit for taking a swing. I still think they're going to be competitive. It's just going to be a matter of, can they win a frickin' Super Bowl? And the other team I got to give a massive shout out to, unfortunately, are the Chicago Bears. Because the Bears, listen, they did everything that their fans wanted to do in this offseason. They went out and got the top candidate as a head coach in Ben Johnson. Heading into this offseason, the Bears needed to address the trenches, and they've done that while going to get pass rushers, but of course also building that offensive line, like getting major guys like Tooney, getting a new center, and this ultimately I think is going to make the Bears a more competitive team. I don't feel comfortable enough putting them into the top 10 because ultimately we have to see how Caleb Williams is going to develop, how Ben Johnson is going to be as a head coach. But I do like what the Bears are doing, and I know it's the running joke that they are the offseason champs, but they deserve some credit for going out and taking some big swings in free agency, and ultimately we'll see if that's going to pan out for this season and what is most likely going to be a very competitive division in that NFC North. And so for the Bears, hold that championship high, hang the banner, and let's see if it translates to some wins. Starting off with number 10, you got the Denver Broncos. Ooh, the Broncos making some moves here. And listen, I was very tempted to put the Green Bay Packers here because even though they haven't done a ton in free agency, I still think they're going to be very competitive this season. And I'm more curious to see what they're going to do in the draft. But hey, that's for power rankings post-NFL draft. Here we're going to be talking about the Denver frackin' Broncos because the Broncos, they decided to go out on a spending spree this free agency. The Broncos had a very impressive season last year, and yes, I want to be very clear. I don't think their offense was really amazing. Their run game was non-existent. They had nobody to throw the ball to besides Sutton, but they deserve a ton of credit because of their defense, and they were able to still make the postseason even with that huge dead cap left by Russell Wilson. And so now that that dead cap is behind them, they're able to actually go and spend in free agency, and oh boy, have they been spenders. To go out and get Dre Greenlaw, Hufanga, and also get Evan Ingram, I think that those guys are going to make that team significantly better, especially on the defense, which already their defense was pretty damn good. And also they get to make fun of the Chargers because Evan Ingram chose to play with Bo Nix over Justin Herbert. Now, I think for the Broncos, they obviously still have some holes that they need to address on their squad. Looking at another weapon at wide receiver, they do need to go get another running back. Javonte Williams, of course, signing with the Dallas Cowboys. And we're going to see how good they're going to be this year. But I think just having that foundational defense, which is already, like I said, really good. I love the Greenlaw signing. And if Hufanga can stay healthy, that secondary is going to be really damn good. And so in a division where, hey, you just had the Chiefs who have been dominating for all these years, they just lost in the Super Bowl, they're losing some pieces. Maybe this is the time for them to start moving up in the rankings. I like what the Broncos have done so far in this offseason. Let's see how they attack the draft. And ultimately, I know Brandon Perna is very happy. Number 9. You got the Minnesota Vikings, the purple incarnation of Satan. The Vikings, they went on a spending spree themselves this past free agency. Of course, Harrison Smith coming back, Byron Murphy getting a major contract. They got Hargrave. They went and got Allen on the line. And of course, going and getting Will Fries, who I think is a huge piece of that offensive line, which we saw against the Lions and also the Rams. They needed to address interior offensive line. So the Vikings are doing something similar to what the Bears were doing, and it's not super surprising. I mean, hell, even the Packers, they're going and addressing the trenches as well, at least on the offensive side of the ball. And that's what the Vikings are doing now, just like the Lions have been doing, just like the Bears are doing in this offseason. It seems like everybody in the NFC North is just saying, hey, we need offensive linemen and defensive linemen. Let's go and spend some money if we have it. And if you're a Vikings fan this offseason, I mean, you just have to absolutely love what Kwesi is doing so far.
And this is me kissing his ass, but that ass deserves to be kissed.
While you did lose Sam Darnold to the Seattle Seahawks, I don't think that is a major loss because, hey, you're investing in J.J. McCarthy, who is basically entering his rookie season as he wasn't able to play last year. And that ultimately is why the Vikings are sitting at number 9, because I think their roster, while very good and has a great supporting staff, they brought back Aaron Jones as well. What's going to determine their success is how good J.J. McCarthy is going to be. And that is just a major question mark right now. So I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt because I still think they're going to be a competitive team. I think they overachieved a little bit last year getting those 14 wins, but ultimately, I think if JJ McCarthy is at least solid or average for his rookie year, they're going to be just fine. And for the purple incarnation of Satan, going out and spending this big money, at least a couple of these guys should work out and make those trenches better. We'll see what they're going to do in the draft. And so because of that, Satan himself lands at number 9, and I hope he doesn't go any higher. Number 8, you got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And listen, I was a little afraid. There was some rumors that maybe Chris Godwin wasn't going to be there anymore, but thankfully, Chris Godwin is still a Tampa Bay Buccaneer.
You know what? I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving!
And for Buccaneers fans, they have to be pretty damn happy what's happened during free agency. Levante David's, of course, coming back. You had Godwin. They went and got Hassan Reddick as well, who I like that signing. It's a 1-year deal, and if Reddick is able to put up some numbers, hey, it's going to work out because they need an additional pass rusher. And for the Buccaneers, they had a pretty damn good season last year. Of course, winning the NFC South as the Falcons kind of pooped the bed there. And for Baker Mayfield, I love this comeback story because he has just been playing very well. And ultimately, while there's still some questions, you look at Todd Bowles, and I know some Buccaneers fans have some issues with him. I'm curious of what their offense is going to look like after losing their offensive coordinator to Duval.
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 Duval. Duval. Duval. Duval. Duval.
Duval.
And for the Buccaneers within their division, I think they're still sitting pretty because you look at the Falcons, we'll see how good Michael Penix is going to be. You look at the Saints and Yeah. And then you look at the Panthers, who are taking steps to get better, but I don't know if they're going to be competing to win that division just yet. And so the Buccaneers, I think, are in the driver's seat right now. They get some major pieces back. And as long as Chris Godwin, coming off of that horrific injury, is able to come back and look pretty good, I think the Buccaneers will be favored to win the NFC South. We'll see what they're going to do in the draft. But right now, the Buccaneers not making some super splashy moves, but they are already a really damn solid team. And I still think that is the case post-free agency. Number 7, you got the LA Rams. The Rams, honestly, probably one of my favorite teams post-free agency because I just love the moves that they made. And listen, Rams fans, you still need to address some things, right? I want to see that offensive line get a little bit better. Of course, you did lose Cooper Kupp, and of course, that's going to be sad for a hot minute as he goes and signs with the Seattle Seahawks. You could go get some more linebackers. But for what the Rams did this past season, I love what they did in free agency because I think it's going to make them insanely competitive. And taking a look at the rest of their division, the Rams cannot be happier than what they are seeing. The big signing for the Rams, of course, being Davante Adams, who wasted absolutely no time replacing Cooper Kupp.
You telling me you're cooking again?
Yeah. Let's see, how should I put this? I'm in. You're out.
And that upgrade of Cooper Kupp to Davante Adams, I think, is pretty significant. While Davante Adams didn't light it up over in New Jersey, he is still a pretty damn good player. And you can call me a homer, and that's totally fine. But Davante Adams is going to play better than I think Cooper Kupp did last season. As Cooper Kupp getting a little bit older, last year did not look so good. I think getting Davante Adams, you are still going to get a very solid wide receiver 2 at minimum. And considering Puka is the future there, Matthew Stafford getting that big-time extension, I love what their offense is looking like. Again, I would like them to add to offensive line. But the reason why I'm so high on the Rams is because what's happening in the NFC West. Look at the rest of the division. The 49ers, they have not had a great free agency as they're losing guys left and right. We're going to kind of see what identity they're going to take going forward this season. The Seahawks, while they did get Sam Darnold, they lost Geno Smith, and they have to definitely build up that offensive line. I am curious of who they're going to throw the ball to because, again, if you watch Cooper Kupp last year, I don't know how good he is going to be. And while I do believe in JSN, I just don't think the Seahawks are going to be the most competitive team this year. And then, of course, you take a look at the Cardinals. The Cardinals who did add Josh Sweat to that line, and I like that move for Arizona, but ultimately, we got to see if Arizona is actually going to take that next step. And so for the Rams, they competed really well against the Philadelphia Eagles in that division round. Their pass rush was lethal last season. You saw what they did against Sam Darnold and the Vikings in that wild card round. And ultimately, I just think the Rams are sitting really pretty here. They're sitting at number 7. Let's see what they do in the draft and see if they're going to go even higher. But for LA, yeah, you got to be pretty damn happy. Number 6, you got the Washington Commanders. Oh, Wildflower's going to be happy. I mean, heading into last season, who would have thunk it that they would have been in the NFC Championship game? Yes, they went out and got Jaden Daniels, but looking at their defense, there was a lot to be desired. Not a lot of people anticipating that that was going to be very good, and at times it did not look good. But for them to make it all the way to the championship game, and yes, they got their ass kicked by the Eagles, but to beat the Lions, who were the number 1 team, and I know they had a lot of injuries on defense, this is really impressive for a rookie quarterback. And so this offseason, the Commanders front office with a ton of money said, hey, we are going to invest in Jaden Daniels and this offense because he deserves it, damn it.
The more you buy, the more you save.
So while they did lose Jonathan Allen, who that was a pretty hefty price for what his production was, they went out and they got Kinlaw, who for me, I think might be their only miss of this past season. He didn't really have a great year last year. And on top of that, he got a pretty expensive contract, which I'm not a huge fan of. However, their acquisitions or their re-signings, I really like. Bringing back Zach Ertz, who's going to be a great weapon for Jaden Daniels. Going and bring back Bobby Wagner as a leader for that defense, even if it's a short-term contract. And of course, going and getting Deebo Samuel, who we'll see if that actually winds up working out, but ultimately the biggest signing is going to be Laramie Tunsil. So making that trade, and Tunsil, if you're a Texans fan, you know that there's some issues when it came to penalties, and you could talk about leadership and locker room, whatever. The most important thing is that man can still block. And to go and get a blindside protector for Jaden Daniels, I think is going to be insanely beneficial for this young quarterback. And ultimately, the Commanders still can address a bunch of these things in the draft. And so while there might be a sophomore slump like we saw maybe from CJ Stroud or just the Texans as a whole looking at their offensive line, building in the trenches and what we've been talking about for this entire Power Rankings episode, that has been the most important thing in football for quite some time, especially offensive line. And so if you're a young quarterback like Jaden Daniels and you don't don't have to worry about getting smacked on your blind side every time, that is going to allow for more plays to open up and ultimately, I think, for them to be more successful. And so while I don't think the Commanders are a world ender right now, I think they have the right coach. I think they have the right personnel. And while some of these signings like Kinlaw or Debo really aren't tickling my fancy, if they're able to produce at least a little bit, I think it's going to help this team that got to the NFC Championship last year. They're a young team. They had a lot of money to spend. They spent it. And let's see if the Commanders can make a miracle run once again. Number 5, you got the Baltimore Ravens. Listen, the most important thing that the Ravens did is that they kept Stanley. He didn't go to the Chiefs. And hell, they even took DeAndre Hopkins from them.
I feel bad for you.
I don't think about you at all.
But going and signing Stanley, I think, was the most important thing this past offseason. They needed to make sure that offensive line was going to stay pretty good for Lamar Jackson, who had a phenomenal season last year. And ultimately, getting DeAndre Hopkins is the most Baltimore Ravens move that ever ravened. But I think it's not going to make their team significantly worse. Because even if you can get some decent production out of DeAndre Hopkins, I know you didn't have the most amazing season with the Chiefs, it's not going to hurt, and maybe it helps them at least a little bit. And listen, do the Ravens still need to go get more weapons and to address their secondary? 1,000,000%. But ultimately, for the Baltimore Ravens, they had a shootout with the Buffalo Bills in the divisional round. They came up short. And for the Ravens, the problem that I have with them is the same that I've had with them for the past couple of years. They get to the postseason, and when the lights are on, they're unable to get over the hump. Whether it's losing the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs and getting away from their run game, or it's losing to the Buffalo Bills and not really able to get anything going. And ultimately, I think for the Ravens, it's just going to be a matter of, regardless of how good their regular season is, can they get it done in crunch time? And we're not going to be able to answer that until next January. The thing is, you need to get to that point, and I think the Ravens are set up pretty well to make another playoff run. And so depending on scheduling, depending on what pieces they add in the draft, I still think the Ravens are in a really, really good spot to be a competitive football team this upcoming year. As long as Lamar Jackson continues to play like Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry has another good season, I think that offense is going to be just fine. And for the Ravens, they're sitting here at number 5. I'd like to put them a little bit higher, but I just have a little bit trouble believing in them right now. But the good news is it's March and we don't have to worry about anything until September, or in the Ravens case, January. Number 4, you got the Buffalo Bills. The Bills, not the most splashy free agency, of course. Von Miller sailing off into the sunset, getting replaced by Joey Bosa, and I think we all knew that it was time to leave Von Miller behind.
Autobots, transform! Not you, Bumblebee.
Now, here's the thing about the Bills. Going and getting Joey Bosa is a low-risk move. The contract is a little bit too high for me, but ultimately, if he's able to be healthy, maybe you're going to get some production out of him. But I'm going to be very honest with you, this does not move the needle for me. What moves the needle for me is the Buffalo Bills were a really damn good team last year. When they were supposed to be in their rebuild, reload mode, guess what? They made it all the way to the AFC Championship game and had a competitive game against the Kansas City Chiefs. They were one game away from the Super Bowl. But ultimately, for the Bills, kind of in a similar situation than the Ravens, they just have to get over the hump. They still need to go get edge rusher. I think they just need to get younger and develop more guys at that position. They need to go get some more weapons as well on offense, looking at receiver. And of course, we'll see what happens with James Cook, who had another great season last year as well. But for the Bills, Josh Allen won MVP, had a phenomenal season last year. And as long as Josh Allen is your quarterback, I think the Bills are always going to have a shot. It's going to be about building the support around him on that squad for them to get over the hump and finally beat the Chiefs in the postseason. But for the Bills, they got rid of a lot of veterans last offseason. If they're able to get some talent in the draft and build them up, I really like the Bills window and how open it's going to be these next few years. And so for Buffalo, I'm not saying it's all the way this time, but they're in a good spot and they're coming in at number 4. Number 3, you got the Kansas City Chiefs. It feels weird not to say reigning, defending Super Bowl champs anymore. But the Chiefs, losing, of course, in the Super Bowl against the Philadelphia Eagles, they got their ass kicked. And this past offseason has not been the most fun for them. They lost Justin Reed to the New Orleans Saints, and while that was a bit expected, it's still a little bit sad. And now Chiefs fans are wondering, hey, we lost Tooney, but we got Jalen Moore. This is a good thing, right?
We don't know what this is. We don't know anything.
Nobody knows anything. But let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. That offensive line has to get better, right? And I would be absolutely shocked if they're not going to address that in the draft as well. Of course, there'll probably be another wide receiver that's going to fall to them because that's just going to be the way the Chiefs work. But the Chiefs need to get better on offense, especially with some weapons and more importantly, with protection. Now, Rice is probably going to come back at some point next season, depending on what that suspension is going to look like. I still think their defense is going to be pretty damn good. They went and got Fulton in the backfield. I'm curious to see how he's going to plug in there, but I think that they should be pretty good. As long as Spags is there, I believe in that defense because he's just a phenomenal coordinator. And for the Chiefs, they're coming in at number 3, but I don't think that is a huge downgrade because they are still the team to beat in the AFC. Because even with all the problems that they had last year and not looking like themselves, whatever, they still beat everybody that they needed to in the postseason. And heading into this year, while their division is getting a bit better, I'm curious to see what this version of the Chiefs are going to look like. Travis Kelce really didn't look that great this past season, but he is going to be returning. I'm curious to see how they're going to handle that tight end situation, if Noah Gray is just going to get more and more targets, or if they're going to go and try and draft a young tight end. But ultimately, I still think the Chiefs are in a great spot. They have Andy Reid, they have Patrick Mahomes, and with that duo, I have a ton of confidence. So let's see what they do in the draft. I still think they deserve a number 3 spot right now, because until an AFC team can beat them in the postseason besides the Bengals, it's their world and we're just living in it until they get to the Super Bowl. Number 2, you got the Detroit Lions. The Lions. Lost to Darius Smith. Again, just shocked he's not staying there forever. Lost Carlton Davis, who got a big old payday with the New England Patriots, but they got DJ Reed. DJ Reed. I wanted DJ Reed. I was pretty vocal about how I wanted DJ Reed, and yet again, Brad Holmes just swoops on in and takes the player that I want. It's great, Brad. I'm so great. If you're watching, Bradley, I don't think your name is actually Bradley. I think it's just Brad. Stop it. Stop taking my players in the draft. Stop taking my players in free agency. Just stop it. Please, for the love of God, stop!
Losing his mind. And I'm reaping all the benefits.
But the Lions, I think, got an upgrade at corner because while Carlton Davis was just fine, DJ Reed, I think, is a better corner. So I think they upgraded there. Of course, that pass rush is still going to need to be addressed, but Hutch coming back is going to be a huge lift for that team. And ultimately, I think the Lions are in a great spot. The biggest question mark, of course, is going to be the coordinators. Losing both their offensive and defensive coordinators is probably going to cause some growing pains, and I think they lost 2 talented individuals. Ultimately, though, their personnel is still really damn good. Within the trenches, that offensive line is still really stacked. Jared Goff had a great year last year, besides all those interceptions he threw in the divisional round and against the Texans. But with the dynamic duo of Sonic and Knuckles and your stupid nicknames, the Lions, I still think, are going to be an incredibly competitive team this year. They won the NFC North last year. However, they won the same amount of playoff games as the rest of the division. Sorry, I had to. I'm not really that sorry. But the Lions, I think, are sitting pretty as the second best team in the NFC and ultimately the NFL as of right now. We'll see what they're going to look like in September and what moves they make in the draft. Brad, I'm giving you nothing. You can't cheat off me this year. You know what? No. Go and get a quarterback, Brad. That's what I want for the Packers. I believe in you, Jordan Love. This is just a smokescreen. Yes. Go and draft a quarterback. And then the Lions will be number 1. And number 1... you got the reigning, defending Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles, they've had themselves quite an offseason. Of course, making some big splashes and giving Saquon Barkley a big old contract. He's the highest paid running back right now. And of course, paying Zach Bond. The only problem is that Zach Bond is looking around going, where the hell did the rest of the defense go?
Where did everybody go?
And I know a lot of the talk about the Eagles is that maybe there's some panic about losing guys like Milton Williams or Josh Sweat, but I really believe in the depth that the Eagles have on defense right now. Their defense was absolutely suffocating in the Super Bowl. You got 2 rookies who were phenomenal, who were up for Defensive Rookie of the Year. One was Cooper DeJean, who had a pick 6 in the freaking Super Bowl. And yes, I'm still salty about not getting Cooper DeJean, but also Mitchell was phenomenal last year. And taking a look at where the Eagles are right now, they are still poised to make a another run at another title. Looking at their division, we'll see what the Cowboys do. The Giants, I don't think it can get much worse. And for the Commanders, who were competitive last year and made it all the way to the NFC Championship game, the Eagles ran them into the ground. And so for Saquon Barkley, who had an excellent season last year and competing for MVP, Zach Bond, who was a phenomenal player, especially as he played the Packers twice, he just kept on showing up. I think that was the priority this past offseason. So while it's not great to lose Williams and Sweat, ultimately, I think the Eagles are going to be just fine. We'll see what they're going to do in the draft. The offense should still be really damn good. And for the Eagles, they're still sitting pretty at number 1. And so just to recap here, at number 1, you got the Eagles, 2 Lions, 3 Chiefs, 4 Bills, 5 Ravens, 6 Commanders, 7 Rams, 8 Buccaneers, 9 Vikings, and 10 Broncos. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Who should be up? Who should be down on this list? Let me know. You guys find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at TomGrossiComedy, all social media see down below. A big shout and thank you to all the Patreon and YouTube members for supporting this channel. And thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.